Before Nigeria even had a name, the Yoruba people already had this rich tapestry of kingdoms. We're talking language, law, bustling markets, complex kingship, deep spirituality, and a highly advanced civilization. From Ile-Ife to Oyo, right through to Ijubu, Egba, Ibadan, Ekiti, Ondo, and Lagos, the Yoruba story is so much older than the colonial borders we see on a map today.
But right now, today, a massive question is echoing all across Yorubaland and the global diaspora. Can a people truly preserve their identity, protect their future, and govern themselves peacefully within a system that so many of its supporters believe has completely failed them?
You see, this isn't just another story about politics. It's a deeply human story about memory, pain, a lot of grievance, but also dignity, hope, and destiny.
This is the story of the Yoruba self-determination movement, the proposed rise of the Democratic Republic of the Yoruba, and the entirely new future its advocates say they are ready to build.
Welcome to this documentary explainer. Today, we're taking a serious, investigative, and very human look at the history and the driving forces behind one of the most monumental movements in West Africa right now.
Yoruba Nation, Identity, Grievance, and the Future. Let's dive in.
Chapter 1: Origins and the Amalgamation. To really understand what's happening today, we have to look back, way back. By the 12th century, Ile-Ife wasn't just a settlement, it was the spiritual nucleus of the Yoruba world. It was a thriving urban center known for advanced glass bead production and a highly refined sculptural tradition. It was literally the cradle of dynastic kingship. And then, by the 15th century, the Oyo Empire rises up. Oyo was a formidable military and political powerhouse across West Africa. They had cavalry, incredibly complex administrative checks and balances, and these vast, sprawling trade networks. These were sovereign, highly organized societies. But then, in 1914, this entire trajectory was fundamentally altered by the British colonial administrator, Lord Lugard. Right, so let's compare how things worked. Indigenous Yoruba governance was built on very complex constitutional checks. In Oyo, for example, the monarch didn't just have absolute power. That power was constantly kept in check by the Oyo Messi, a powerful council of leading nobles. But British colonial rule? That introduced something completely different. Lord Lugard brought in this system of indirect rule, which forcefully integrated totally distinct ethnic groups just for administrative convenience. Historians and scholars point out that this artificial system built new social hierarchies and forced people into political identities they never asked for. And honestly, that planted the very early seeds of the structural imbalance we see today. And historical reports are pretty clear on this. The 1914 amalgamation of the Northern and Southern Protectorates? It was never a negotiated union of the people. It was done primarily for economic reasons. The colonial administration literally took the budget surpluses from southern Nigeria and used them to offset the deficits in the north. Today, supporters of self-determination argue that this forced, economically driven framework has completely lost its legitimacy over time. Which brings us to Chapter 2, the question of federalism. Now, you might not know this, but Nigeria actually enjoyed a brief golden era of regionalism. Under the 1963 Constitution, there was true federalism. Regions could identify their own strengths, control their own resources, and develop at their own pace without the central government constantly breathing down their necks. But in 1966, military incursions totally suspended that constitution. The federalism that was supposed to protect Nigeria's diversity was scrapped for a rigid, over-centralized unitary structure. Decades of military rule fundamentally deformed the state, basically stripping the regions of all their autonomy. To put that into perspective, let's look at the revenue numbers today. The central federal government takes a massive 52.68% of national revenue. That leaves the 36 states fighting over just 26.72%, and the local governments are left with a tiny 20.60%. Critics argue this has turned vibrant, naturally wealthy regions into nothing more than appendages of the center. States are essentially operating on a feeding bottle system of monthly federal handouts rather than generating their own wealth like they used to. And as you'd expect, these financial disparities create some profound structural grievances. We're talking about an extreme over-centralization of political power and deeply uneven socioeconomic development. Leaders in the region argue that Nigeria has been stuck in a consumption mode of just sharing oil money instead of a productive mode that actually builds economic growth. This intense feeling of marginalization is exactly what's fueling the increasingly loud cries to either completely remake the Nigerian state or just exit it altogether. Chapter 3: Insecurity and Economic Potential. Beyond the politics, the human toll here is absolutely heartbreaking. Verified reports show a terrifying rise in insecurity across the region. We're talking about rising kidnappings, devastating farmer-herder conflicts, and banditry that has created deep, very real fears for public safety. Poverty levels are shooting up, and it is absolutely crucial to state here. This is a demand for government accountability and public safety. It is not about blaming entire ethnic groups. People are simply demanding their fundamental human rights to life, peace, and security, the very basics that they feel this over-centralized system has completely failed to deliver. Just think about what was lost. Before the military wiped out regionalism in 1966, poverty levels in the Southwest were actually below 40%. Access to education and the quality of that education were significantly higher than the national average. The Yoruba nation was literally on a firm, steady trajectory for sustainable human development before that unitary pole dragged everything down. But despite all these setbacks, the economic possibility of the Yoruba region is just staggering. Yorubaland has the massive economic engine of Lagos, robust maritime ports, and incredible human capital driving education and technology. And beneath the ground, the land is rich in mineral resources: oil, gas, bitumen, gold, limestone, and granite. Advocates genuinely believe that if these resources were directly under local, democratic control, the region wouldn't just survive, it would absolutely thrive on the global stage. Chapter 4: The Yoruba Self-Determination Movement. So, for decades, Yoruba leaders have been pleading for restructuring, basically asking to go back to that regional autonomy we talked about. But listen to what Gani Adams, the Are Ona Kakamfo of Yorubaland, says. He noted that they have graduated from the restructuring they've been clamoring for since 1991 to self-determination. Supporters argue that the 1914 framework has entirely lost its legitimacy, and they believe the only way forward now is as a completely sovereign nation. And this ideology has coalesced into a very specific vision: the Democratic Republic of the Yoruba, or DRY. Now, as defined by its advocates, this is a strictly peaceful self-determination project. It's built entirely on the preservation of Yoruba identity, restoring human dignity, and establishing true democratic governance and justice, all through nonviolence and within the bounds of international law. The movement is led by Provisional President and head of the Provisional Government, His Excellency Mobolaji Olawale Akinola Omokori. Under his leadership, supporters are seeking a peaceful, diplomatic exit from Nigeria. Advocates of DRY strongly believe the Yoruba people deserve peaceful self-governance, and they point to international covenants, like the UN Charter, which guarantee the right of indigenous peoples to shape their own political and economic futures.
Chapter 5: The Restructuring Debate.
So right now, the Yoruba people are standing at a massive crossroads. On one side, you have the advocates for self-determination. They want a peaceful exit and total autonomy to preserve their identity and guarantee their own security. But on the other side, critics say Nigeria should be reformed from within, not divided. They push for restructuring, meaning heavily devolving powers back to the states, allowing local resource control and state police, while keeping the unity and the massive economic market of the Nigerian Federation intact. And those critics of secession raise some very valid, verified concerns. First off, the Nigerian constitution currently prohibits dividing the country. There are also deep historical fears that a unilateral separation could spark widespread instability, bringing back the tragedies we saw in the 1960s. Plus, navigating the maze of international law, territorial integrity, and the deeply entangled economies of Nigeria's regions, that presents a monumental, incredibly complex challenge. So, we're left with this lingering, incredibly heavy question. Can true justice, security, and prosperity actually be achieved by tearing down and rebuilding the Nigerian house from the inside, or is the only way to truly survive by leaving it entirely? Chapter 6: A Vision for the Future. At the end of the day, whether it happens through a radically restructured Nigeria or a brand new sovereign democratic republic of the Yoruba, the ultimate goal for the people remains the exact same: human flourishing. It's a deeply hopeful vision anchored in peaceful dialogue, preserving an ancient culture, building incredibly strong, transparent democratic institutions, and focusing relentlessly on youth development, absolute public security, and prosperity for everyone. The journey of the Yoruba people is a profound story of resilience, intellect, and incredibly deep heritage. And as the geopolitical tectonic plates of West Africa continue to shift, the whole world is watching. Will this push for self-determination redraw the map of the continent, or will it forge a brand new Nigeria?
One people, one voice, one destiny.